Back in the early 90s, Final Fight set the standard for urban brawlers. But while the original found glory in the arcades, its SNES-only sequels became more like whispers on the streets of Metro City. This is the little-known story of Final Fight 2 and Final Fight 3, two games that quietly evolved the legacy of the franchise, overlooked in their time, but celebrated in hindsight. Today we dive deep into how Capcom kept the fight alive by leaving the chaos of the arcades, choosing instead to bet on Nintendo's 16-bit home console following the commercial success of the original Final Fight. Released in 1993, exclusively for the Super Nintendo, Final Fight 2 broke away from its arcade-born roots. Both it and its sequel would be developed by Capcom's consumer division, specifically targeting the SNES. This meant they could tailor their games to the console's capabilities. It therefore became a console-native sequel designed to extend the franchise's reach, with producer Fujiwara Tokuro at the helm, who had directed 1985's Ghosts and Goblins, and would go on to conceive of Resident Evil as a remake of his 1989 horror game, Sweet Home. In Final Fight 2, the Mad Gear Gang returns with a vengeance, kidnapping Guy's fiancée, Rena, and her father, Genryo Sai. But instead of another tour of Metro City, the sequel takes the fight globally, and with a strange lack of Guy himself, considering the stakes. Instead, heavyweight wrestler turned mayor, Mike Hagar, returns with two new allies. Maki, younger sister to the kidnapped Rena, and a fierce and quick ninja in training from the Bushin school, and the mysterious swordsman all-rounder, Carlos, who strangely prefers to use his kicks than his blade, but much like the blonde-haired denim-wearing Cody from Final Fight 1, can fight with knives. From Hong Kong to France, Italy to Japan, Final Fight 2 takes players on an international beat-em-up tour. While the core gameplay remains familiar, possibly to its detriment, Final Fight 2 tweaks the mechanics slightly with more responsive controls and a variety of new enemies. However, it lacks the branching paths or deep mechanics that its sequel would offer. What it delivers instead is a colourful, fast-paced return to form, anchored by Capcom's signature pixel art, and an energetic soundtrack. Alongside all the new enemies, only a couple of fan favourites returned from the OG, the giants of the Andore family, and Relento. This military fanatic was a boss from the arcade version of Final Fight, but had to be cut from the SNES version of that game due to memory constraints. The developers brought him back to compensate for this omission. Not only that, the game supported two-player co-op, unlike the original's SNES version, and there were 3 characters to choose from, whereas in the original Final Fight, one of the characters got the chop. The game itself kicks off in Hong Kong, where Hagar, Maki, and Carlos begin their pursuit of the reborn Mad Gear Gang. Amid the bustling streets and marketplaces, the trio fights through waves of thugs in search of clues about Rena and Genryo Sai's whereabouts. After taking down the level boss 1-1, an incredibly acrobatic martial artist given his size, the trail leads to the next hotspot in the Mad Gear's international crime circuit. Stage 2 shifts us to France, where the action unfolds around a massive airfield. Here, players face a new gauntlet of enemies on their way to fight the area boss Freddy, a former US Marine and hulking giant with moves similar to Andore. Moving on to the 3rd stage, we land in the heart of Holland, complete with scenic windmills, rolling hills, and sinister crows. Mad Gear's forces grow more brutal, with aggressive enemy types swarming the screen, and level boss Bratkin waits locked up in a dungeon below. From there, it's on to merry old England for a spot of fierce urban warfare. In one of the game's more stylish stages, players brawl first beside a set of train tracks before climbing atop a moving train to reach Philippe, dressed as a clown and wielding a deadly cane. He introduces more complex attack patterns, raising the stakes. Stage 5 takes the fight to Italy, with gorgeous architecture masking Mad Gear's continued corruption. Here the enemies grow stronger, mixing heavy hitters with fast-moving acrobats. The boss, Relento, makes his return with grenades and militaristic precision, marking one of the game's most memorable encounters. The final stage takes us to Japan, where the gang's leader is based. the setting moves through traditional dojos and into Mad Gear's stronghold. The final boss, Retu, is a towering martial arts master clad in kabuki attire, signaling the game's dramatic climax. Defeating him triggers the rescue of Rena and Genryo Sai, but only if the player finishes the game on the higher difficulties, the game's ending being tied to the difficulty level that the player chooses, with lower levels only showing partial endings. So it's quite possible that some of you watching, who played this back in the day, never saw the true ending. Also of note, and just like in the original Final Fight, a pair of acrobatic enemies were gender swapped in its international versions. Mary and Eliza, no, not Ken's wife Eliza, became Leon and Robert in international versions of the game, though Eliza would eventually return in Street Fighter VI's World Tour mode. Speaking of Street Fighter, both Chun-Li and Guile have background cameos in the game. The strongest woman in the world enjoying a bowl of noodles in Hong Kong, and the captain of the United States Air Force watches you kick ass at an airfield in France. Reception to the game at the time was mixed, with many critics praising its improved graphics and sound effects, but noting that its soundtrack wasn't as strong as the first game. The gameplay was also seen as simply more of the same, competent but safe. Some critics even went so far as to call the game bland, and the absence of Guy left many scratching their heads, considering the personal stakes of the story. Although not groundbreaking, the game holds nostalgic value for SNES fans, and eventually went on to be one of Capcom's highest-selling games on the system. And for new character Maki at least, the story didn't end here. She'd go on to appear in Capcom vs SNK 2 and Street Fighter Alpha 3 Upper years later, also turning up in comics and making cameos in other media. Her legacy lived on, even if not everyone remembers where the character came from. By 1995, Capcom returned with Final Fight 3, a swan song for the SNES that brought big changes. Fujiwara also returned as producer, bringing his experience in the role from the previous game and past work on the Mega Man series with him. The threat this time? A new gang, the Skullcross, has filled the power vacuum left following Mad Gear's defeat, plunging Metro City into chaos once more. Mayor Hagar steps in, sporting a new hairstyle, joined by returning hero Guy, and two newcomers. Lucia, a tough young cop with blazing kicks, and definitely not a JoJo reference, Dean, a mysterious bruiser with electric fists and a mysterious past. The game has multiple routes that in some cases can lead to different areas and bosses, and there are multiple endings, but here's roughly what to expect. Stage 1 starts in Metro City's suburbs, now under siege. Players must brawl through a crumbling police station and streets in chaos, showcasing the gang's reckless disregard for human life. The level ends with a showdown against corrupt cop Dave, whose signature move is a butt splash. Stage 2 shifts us to the downtown district. Slinking through back alleys, players take on waves of enemies before facing off against Coleman, a muscular foe, though he clearly skipped leg day, hence his top-heavy appearance. In Stage 3, you make your way past a luxury car dealership to a bus stop. There should be a fight with Kane here, but I guess I missed the bus or something. The fourth stage changes things up with a trip to the city docks. Just don't get distracted by the beautiful sunset, as waves of thugs attack you from all angles. You don't want to end up in this situation. Eventually, you make it to a ship and fight Drake, unless you take a different route, and end up in Chinatown to fight Wong. Drake the sailor is fast and strong, but less so without his anchor. Next comes Stage 5, set in an underground factory. The atmospheric lighting and heavy machinery adds a gritty tone as the gang's elite members begin to appear more frequently. Players eventually face Stray, a professional killer who was paid to kill Dean's family in order to intimidate and make Dean reconsider joining their gang. Can't fault the logic in that, I guess. Stage 6 finds you back in the city at one of its tallest buildings. Welcome to Skullcross's HQ. Make your way up the building through wave upon wave of enemies to the rooftop, and here you'll confront the true mastermind, Black, a powerfully built final boss with brutal physical attacks and no mercy, until you fry his ass. You might have gathered that gameplay-wise, Final Fight 3 was a leap forward. Players could now dash, a la Captain Commando, opening up new combo opportunities. You could also perform command-based special attacks, and even charge up a super move meter for an extra flashy attack, something almost unheard of in beat-em-ups at the time. Weapons also return from previous entries, but this time each character specializes in one, granting access to unique combo attacks when wielding their preferred weapon. As previously noted, levels contained multiple routes, hidden areas, and the game's endings were based on the characters chosen, paths taken, and the selected difficulty level. Players could even have a CPU-controlled second player help them out. The game introduced a sense of replayability and depth missing from earlier entries. Visually, Final Fight 3 leaned even further into the gritty street aesthetic, character sprites were more detailed, and the soundtrack punched harder than ever. The combat had real weight and fluidity of movement, making every punch, slam, and combo feel like it mattered. Still, despite all this innovation, Final Fight 3 quietly faded on release. Overshadowed by the rise of 3D gaming, having come late in the SNES lifecycle, it slipped under the radar. But retro fans today hail it as one of the most advanced 16-bit brawlers Capcom ever produced. Final Fight would return to arcades 4 years later in 1999 with Final Fight Revenge, followed by a port to the Sega Saturn, but only in Japan. But this time it was a 1v1 3D fighting game, rather than the side-scrolling brawler fans had come to know and love. Then there was Streetwise in 2006. But we don't talk about that. Of the two SNES sequels, only Final Fight 2 has seen a re-release, all the way back in 2009 on the Wii Virtual Console. Final Fight 3 has, for decades, been left in the shadows, an overlooked gem appreciated mostly by collectors and emulation enthusiasts, and in the memories of those lucky enough to have played it at the time. Over time, both titles have gradually earned the respect they were once denied, with Final Fight 3's mechanics, in particular, now seen as ahead of their time. Several characters from the SNES sequels would reappear in later Capcom games. Lucia made her return in 2019 as part of Street Fighter V's 4th season.
Aw, great! Just after I poured the hot water into the noodles.
While Guy had already become a staple in various Street Fighter rosters. Mike Hagar, meanwhile, remained a fan favorite thanks to his appearances in Saturday Night Slam Masters and the Marvel vs. Capcom series, and Maki, most notably, in Capcom vs. SNK 2. These games helped preserve the mythos of Metro City during a time when Final Fight had no arcade presence. While neither sequel captured the spotlight like the original, they planted seeds that would bloom decades later in games like Street Fighter VI, where Metro City is once again front and center. Final Fight 2 and 3 may not have made headlines when they dropped, but in hindsight they stand as essential chapters in Capcom's legacy. Whether through international brawls, branching storylines, or powerful new characters, these sequels deepened the fight and expanded the world of Metro City. In an age of beat-em-up revivals, there's newfound appreciation for Capcom's mid-90s risks, and some hope for a true sequel or remake of the franchise. Just don't, given its entanglement with the much more popular Street Fighter games, hold your breath. Let us know in the comments which of these games was your favourite, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the pixelated powerhouses of gaming history. Until next time, be excellent to yourselves and one another, and keep kicking butt.